Welcome back, SCP enjoyers. Tonight we delve into the horrifying reality of SCP stories, so make sure all the doors are locked and get comfy. Story 1, Blackbird. The first thing that one would notice about Dr. Michael Prescott's office was the color of the walls. Once his clients entered his domain, they were greeted with a seeming nothingness surrounding the typical items that are normally seen in a therapist's office. It's the color one would see while taking a midnight stroll and thinking about life and regrets. Michael Prescott knew a thing or two about regrets. He will also say, if asked, why his walls were colored the way they are. The color black induced a wide range of emotions in people, from fear of the unknown to mourning and emptiness. But it could also be associated with comfort and calming of the mind. That's what Michael designed it for, to make his patients comfortable. Michael was sitting in his office chair as usual, mindlessly scrolling from his phone to pass the time. There were the usual unhinged takes and news stories that he couldn't be bothered with. Things were going well recently. For now. A knock on the door. They were here. He quickly shoved his phone in his pocket and pulled out his clipboard and pen, awaiting his newest client. The door cracked slightly open, and Michael's newest patient slowly peeked their head into the room. "You may come in." The patient nodded and pushed the door further open. They were a new arrival from Site 17, transferred over to Site 35 for a more extensive therapeutic treatment. For one thing, they certainly looked like they came out of 17. They were wearing a standard gray jumpsuit with their designation bolded on their right sleeve. They looked jittery, their eyes dashing around the room as if looking for someone who wasn't there. Their black hair was frazzled and messy, like it had never been combed in years. "Are you all right?" Michael asked with concern in his eyes. No, I'm fine, don't worry. It's been a lot." The client looked over their shoulder before looking back at Michael. "One relates, but I am here for you, and we can talk about whatever you like. No strings attached." The client nodded before shifting in their seat. "Of course. My name's Avery, by the way." Michael reached out his hand. "It's nice to meet you, Avery." Avery reached out in kind, then slightly pulled their hand back, expecting something to happen. But Michael still waited. They eventually gripped his hand firmly and awkwardly shook it. "It's nice to meet you too, sir." Avery gave their best smile. "No need to call me that. There doesn't need to be a hierarchy here. I'm just here to help." "What do you want me to call you then?" He thought about it for a moment. "Just Michael would be fine for now." Okay." Avery slumped down in their seat. Something seems off. Michael switched his posture, keeping himself looking professional and sympathetic. His full attention was on Avery, and he tried his damnedest to not strain his eyes. To most, some things are automatically obtained for them. Most people would not have to keep constant check on tone, body language, facial expressions, the literal versus the figurative, semantics, and hidden social cues manually. But Michael was not most people, and that was okay because he was himself. "Have you had any problems at your previous site? Anything particular that I need to know about?" Avery slumped down even further. "You can be honest with me. Nothing that you will say will leave this room," Michael reassured them. Avery pulled themselves back up and started to twiddle their thumbs. "I don't know if I can say this." "It's all right if you can't. I just want to know how you're feeling." "No, I literally don't know if I can say this. What's the difference between you and those other shrinks? I know that this stuff isn't really between you and me." Avery looked even more wary of the room around them. "I promise you, I am under strict confidentiality. You are safe here." "Safe from what?" "Everything feels the same. Your mental health is my top priority. Our work here is to help you. I want you to feel safe." Avery glared at him. "This is not safe at all. And I don't think being put in a room with concrete walls and barely anything to keep you company is exactly the best for someone's mental health." Michael suddenly became very aware of the sound of the air circulating above. He sighed. "I know how that can feel, like you're suffocating. But we don't do that here." Avery gathered a bit more confidence. "Really? Is that true? Or is all this just a way to move me somewhere else so you can distract me from the fact that you're violating my rights as a human being?" Michael could see the determination in their eyes, to be set free. It reminded him of his past work, where many similar conversations like this occurred. "You know what they told me back at 17? We take pride in getting to know our tenants, and their well-being is our #1 priority. And they were very concerned about me in particular. But I know that's just code for we're watching you at all times, punk. And you know the worst part? They had a saying where they were a big, happy family. Christ. Michael knew those feelings all too well. He heard similar stories by other clients over the years. It became a game by the other anomalies to see which site would be the worst to be contained in, 19 or 17. After overhearing their conversations, Michael frankly thought that it was a hard choice to pick. He clasped his hands together. I promise you, Avery, in this place we will do what's best for you. Your cell won't be a cell, it'll be your room, and you will be free to roam around most of the facility at any time. Avery raised an eyebrow. So I can just walk around with nobody watching my every move? You have to be joking. I am not. For a split second, Michael could see that Avery's eyes flashed a bright green. The door to the office then slammed open, almost being knocked off its hinges. They turned their head to the door, spotting no one. They turned their head back. Coast is clear, unless your security has fancy invisible tech. No one is going to watch you for any reason, Avery. We all have a right for privacy. Avery shuffled in their seat. This sounds too good to be true. How did they allow you to do any of these things? This just doesn't sit right with me. Because since the beginning, we wanted to take care of those who needed a little help to live stable lives. Our procedures are lax because there is no threat from a single person in this facility. Because why would they be a threat? It's like what our founding director once said. You are not our subjects. You are our guests. Michael attempted to place his hand on Avery's shoulder before being swatted away. Guests? In a prison, where I can never leave. What kind of Kool-Aid did they put you on? Avery's eyes burned with a fiery rage, a fury at a system that had hurt so many people time and time again. Michael immediately regretted having this entire conversation. You're slipping, Michael. He quietly tapped his foot with a lively rhythmic beat. Sometimes he would spin his pen around in his fingers or rock back and forth to help him regulate himself. In times like this, he definitely needed it. I know how you're feeling. Believe me, when I first learned of our mission, I felt the same way. I can't let you leave. We both know that. But I can help you live your life, even in a place like this. Avery crossed their arms. I think I get it now. Your straight white ass thinks it's better to integrate us into this nonsense system so we can be content, and you can feel like you're not participating in something so morally wrong. You probably haven't had a single taste of what we experience in your life. Why not just leave? It'll be better for you that way. Well, I'm not exactly... He killed the thought before he could blurt it out loud. I will not leave you at the hands of something that punishes you for being different. That was a vow I made to myself years ago. I was once like those other researchers. I once disregarded a friend's feelings and prioritized his containment protocols over anything else. I will not make that same mistake again. I am here for you, always. Silence filled the room. Do you think I deserve being like this? Avery asked, gesturing to themselves. You deserve to be you, no matter what. Michael smiled warmly. As they awkwardly waved goodbyes and the session ended, Michael had a thought that kept nagging him for quite a while. Do I deserve to be myself as well? He had that thought for as long as he could remember. It had been there since the start. 2001, he was a strange kid. Well, that's what the other kids would call him. Weird. The nerd who collected Pokemon cards and shared them with the other outcasts of the school. The scrawny, timid one who'd pick grass at recess. The one who was practically an enigma to everyone else. He never got picked on much by the other kids, but there was definitely an odd atmosphere in the classroom when he was around. He was having a conversation with a kid named Cullen, a fellow like-minded Pokemon enthusiast. Mike's favorite was Gengar, while Cullen's favorite was Charizard, which he thought was a basic pick, just like vanilla ice cream. He always wondered why anyone would even pick vanilla as their favorite flavor. Cullen turned to him. So, what do you think about the new game coming up? Mike tilted his head. He tended to do that. What new game? My uncle works for Game Freak. He says they're making a new one. Your uncle works for Game Freak? Michael didn't know that. Yeah, he makes all the pixels and stuff. Cullen tried to not burst into laughter, putting his hand over his mouth to stifle the giggling, or rather, squeaking that he'd usually make. After a few seconds of silence, the gears finally turned in Mike's head. Okay, Mickey, you got me. You always fall for this, Mike. You're an easy target. Cullen was right about that. He was certainly gullible. A lot of things would go over his head just as high as the neck of a giraffe. Their necks could supposedly go all the way up to the clouds. At least, that's what Cullen told him. Well, it wasn't very funny to begin with. Cullen grunted. Think you can do better? Mike scratched his hair. Sorry, I just don't like when I'm the one being teased. I'm not teasing you, Mike. It's just good fun. We can have fun together, right? He wanted to say something else, but he decided to let it go. Yeah, right. Then Cullen pulled his collection out. Look what I got at the store yesterday. This is going to blow your mind. He looked at Cullen's new cards. They weren't particularly special, but he pretended to drop his jaw in amazement for courtesy's sake. They ogled at the cards for a while before the bell rang, and they headed back to class. Though no one was looking at him, Mike could feel them staring regardless. He wondered why he felt like the shadows on the wall, wanting to become like the light, but always being blocked by something else. He wondered about a lot of things. He wondered why the other kids talked differently around him, and why they couldn't just talk to him normally. Why they told him that he looked shifty when he wasn't looking at them, even though that didn't really matter in the first place with his lazy eye. Why they whispered to themselves behind his back, and he could never figure it out. He had to tell someone about it, maybe a trusted adult like his teacher. When class was over, Mike ran up to Mrs. Noth and started to tug on her sleeve to get her attention. Mrs. Noth? She turned towards him. Yes, Michael? Mike held his head down and looked at the floor. They hate me, don't they? The teacher gasped before leaning down to Mike's line of sight and placing her hands on his shoulders. No one hates you, Michael. Then why do they talk to me like I'm an alien? Because you're special, Michael. You're different from everyone else. And that's a good thing. You are smart and you are kind. You're going to do great things in the future, okay? He nodded. Okay. She patted him on the head. Now go have fun with the other kids. They won't bite. Mike turned away from the teacher and sulked back to his seat. He didn't even bother. Because why would he? He could barely manage a conversation to save his life, and the other kids would tear him apart. Maybe he should be torn apart. Maybe that would get rid of what's wrong with him. 2024. The fluorescent lights at the site always bothered Michael. They looked like someone deliberately manufactured the lights to try and make them look soothing and gentle, but the actual product never quite made the mark. The floral carpeting and the plaster walls weren't much better, but Michael could sense the craftsmanship, and that they at least tried with the overall design. It was the lights that frustrated him. Not as much as how he frustrated himself, but they were quite annoying. Still, he understood why they were there, to create an environment where the humanoids didn't have to look at concrete halls and sterile labs while wandering around. On the topic of wandering around, Michael was still kicking himself for lying to that kid. He was mostly correct about where the anomalies could go, but they were only restricted to the cafeteria, the section hosted by the Anomalous Entity Engagement Division, the appropriately titled Playcare, and the designated lounges designed for the anomalies to relax together. They were not allowed to enter any of the research offices or the practical sectors without permission. They were not allowed to visit each other's cells, and they were definitely not permitted to lollygag around the restricted areas of the site. Frankly, this wasn't the worst thing that happened when he forgot something, but it wouldn't be the last. He eventually made his way to the cafeteria, where a whole host of interesting things were taking place. The security officers were all mingled in one table, most likely shit-talking their boss or discussing some other escapade they did while intoxicated. Michael's friend Emily was there as well, sitting at the far corner at the table. He gave a little wave, and she beamed at him and waved fervently right back. The researchers who weren't nerdy enough to specialize in temporal or ectodimensional studies covered most of the seats, so Michael decided to head towards the convenient empty seat next to Emily. He would rather not sit at a crowded table with people he barely talked to. He turned in that direction before bumping into someone's side. He didn't see her coming towards him at all. Sorry about that, he tried to say before being immediately interrupted. You weren't paying attention at all. Yeah, I can see that. The woman smirked. She was a brunette with hair that flowed down to her shoulders and a nasty grin that creeped Michael out. She was wearing the standard security officer uniform, which meant that Michael could easily guess why her behavior was so jarring and repugnant. Yeah, I didn't mean to bump into you like that. It was an accident. That was all on me. Of course it was. So maybe watch where you're going next time. The officer harumphed at him, which Michael did not think was a real thing that people could do, and grumpily stomped toward her seat. After standing there in silence for longer than he should have, Michael then remembered what he was supposed to do. Thankfully, the seat wasn't taken. Did you see what just happened to me back there? Michael asked Emily. Yep, that's Vanessa for you, Emily said, taking a bite out of her meatball sub. Right. Vanessa Hickman, that was her name. Emily told a lot of stories about her, but she told Michael a lot of stories that he probably didn't need to hear about to begin with, so they all blended together in his head. But I tried to be polite. It wasn't even that bad, Michael insisted. Look, Mike, some people just don't give a shit about anything. Not everyone's going to give you the same respect that you give them. She was right on that. I know, but I shouldn't have bumped into her in the first place. Emily patted him on the shoulder. It's all right, Mike. It was just an accident. Let's move on to something else. All right. But his mind was still focusing on the incident. He could have been more perceptive. If he looked just a little bit further to the left, none of it would have happened, and everything would go smoothly. Unfortunately, nothing would ever go smoothly for Michael, and he knew why. He always knew why. Emily snapped him back to reality. You good? Of course, I'm regular. She snorted. I never heard that from you. Regular? Yeah, regular as every other day. I used to say that all the time in high school for some reason. I guess it now decided to come back in my head right at this moment, Michael explained. I'm going to put that in my vocabulary from now on. That is just too good, Emily said, pointing at Michael with a French fry. Well, whenever you need another of my random phrases, I'm right. He was immediately interrupted by something bumping into his side. At least it wasn't me this time. He turned towards the figure and saw a small green figure with large pointy ears and a recognizable golden fang. Doctor, I didn't see you there. My apologies. The goblin gave a bow to acknowledge his offense. Hi, Victor. Michael frowned. Nothing ever good happened when Victor showed up. Well, my good fellow, I was wondering if you would take part in another of my experiments. You see, I have this weapon that will turn anything in its path into chickens, and I wanted to see if you... He waved him off. Sorry, Victor, but I'm a little busy right now. I'll see if I can come in next time. No worries, no worries. I have plenty of candidates to choose from. But I'll get you next time. Just you wait, Victor proclaimed, waggling a finger at him and grinning maniacally. Another individual rolled up in a wheelchair to grab Victor by the shirt collar. Oh, hey, Desmond, Emily greeted him. The bald, dark-skinned man with a scruffy beard waved with his other hand. I'll take him from here. Hey, what did I tell you about grabbing me like that? You're my assistant, not my butler. Unhand me now, good sir, Victor exclaimed as he was dragged away by Desmond. Emily shook her head. Man, I forgot how weird this place is sometimes. It's not as strange as that time when that guy from 87 came to visit. You know what? I take it back. Nothing is ever going to beat whatever clusterfuck that was, Emily concurred. Michael hoped she was right with that. For all he knew, his embarrassing mishaps had never been seen by anyone, and he kept it all to himself. For good reason. Because how else would one live if they always dropped the ball, over and over again, with no end in sight? He doubted anyone would like to live a life like that. Like his. He had to get those pesky thoughts away, so he decided to divert the thoughts into a more positive direction. He was standing in the research and experimentation sector, observing the several cramped desk spaces for researchers to conduct their tests and examine their samples. After successfully escorting a researcher back to her work after their session, he decided to take a break and watch the various happenings in the room. He could see the vast ocean of people who he barely recognized, but he did know a few faces. There was the black-haired gentleman from New Jersey, who had plenty of things to say about his state. There was the girl with the Hello Kitty keychain on her purse, who was most known for her interesting music tastes and how she brightened up everyone's day. And there was also the woman who used to work as a barista to help pay for her degree before an anomalous accident at her workplace caused the foundation to shut the place down and eventually recruit her. Each and every day, he wondered about these people's lives, how they were as vivid and complex as his own, and how they existed around him like an anthill sprawling deep underground, with elaborate passageways to other lives that he'll only be there for once, as a blur of traffic passing on the highway, or as a lighted window at dusk. It was spellbinding to him, how he'll only see a glimpse of what kind of lives these people lived, Maybe that was why he liked his job so much, not just to help people, but also to see more glimpses of these hidden worlds that he would normally miss. His daydream was immediately disrupted by a tap on the shoulder. He turned around and saw someone who he did not want to see in the slightest. He was a short, plump man with a hideous comb-over, and his skin looked very similar to a shriveled grape. His eyes sagged, and Michael either thought he was brought back to life from the dead, or he just never particularly aged well. He was Howard Bates, the head of research and experimentation, and he always worried Michael whenever he showed up, even more than Victor. At least with Victor, he knew what he was in for. But with Howard, he had no idea why his stomach always flared up whenever they met, and that worried him immensely. Howard held his hand up, like a half attempt at waving. "Hey, Michael." He just stood there. "Hi. I'm glad to see you around. My juniors over here have been quite a hassle to deal with." Howard gestured at his subordinates. "They're JRs, so they're still new to the job." Howard shook his head. "No, I don't think it's just that. I have a very strict schedule when it comes to this line of work. These samples don't last all day, and they have to work if they want to sort them on time. It's very difficult to do, and especially difficult if you don't bother at all." He raised an eyebrow. "Does that indicate that you don't particularly enjoy their mingling?" "Yes. They have other times to socialize, not during times of such importance as this." Michael could see now why no one on R&E liked Howard. The scrupulous types weren't to be reckoned with. Howard turned to look at his working lab rats before turning back to Michael. "I have a question that's been on my mind lately. How come I don't see you around often?" "Shit." Michael put his hands in his pockets. "I'm just busy doing my own work." What else do you do outside of work?" He didn't have an answer to that. He clawed at himself internally to think of something, but there wasn't much time. I do cardio around the perimeter of the site and I talk to my friend." Howard nodded. "Well, it's good that you're doing something with someone you care for. Now, how's your Miss Pretty Pretty doing?" His stomach tied itself into a knot. "You mean Emily?" "Come on, I know you two have been together for a while." Michael waved his hands around frantically. "It's not like that. I'm not dating anyone yet. I'm not—" "You can be honest with me. I won't tell anyone." Howard attempted to assuage him, giving him a wink. "I'm not," Michael snapped, before widening his eyes in the realization of how loud his voice echoed throughout the room. A few eyes were staring at him. Howard simply smiled and turned to the distracted researchers. "Please get back to work." They immediately went back to what they were doing without question. Michael's hands were still shaking. I'm sorry. I didn't mean... I should have been more forthright with you." "No. I think your conviction was on point. I like you, Michael. You have something that a lot of people don't. You have a keen mind. The knowledge you wield is a wonderful thing. Don't let anyone else take that from you or lead you astray. Too many have fallen for the wrong path. But you and I, we know what's right from wrong." Howard's grin extended even further, and Michael could have sworn he heard his skin stretching. He decided to exit the conversation prematurely. "Well, duty calls, so I have to go. Thanks." As he hurried out of the lab, Howard called out to him one last time. "I'm looking forward to seeing you again." No way was he going to do that. Not with him almost being outed. No way in hell. He almost forgot about it. He barely told anyone, except for his brother, and he never really had to tell anyone else because being seen as a lonely loser was far better for him than the alternative. It brought back memories. It also reminded him of something else. 2007. He was sitting on his family's dusty old couch from 10 or so years ago, torn and practically scratched to death by the family cats. It was dinner time and he was eating hot dogs while watching the latest mediocre sitcom. Michael's brother Merrick was eyeing at him in the corner of the room, but he didn't notice, as his mind was focusing on the TV in front of him. The sounds around him were drowned out and became muffled to the point of being nearly muted. His thoughts became a vivid canvas, flowing with colorful images and sounds. He was thinking about a lot of things lately. His future was gaining on him now more than ever. What would happen if he went to university? He did not know. His support systems would be gone, and he would have to fend for himself. Could he ever fend for himself? He did not know that either. His constant setbacks at home were already enough of a problem. His thoughts started to race around his mind, going faster and faster. The what-ifs kept coming, but Michael could hear another muffled voice calling out to him. It grew louder and louder until... "Mike, for fuck's sake!" Merrick hollered at him. Not again. "Sorry about that." Michael looked at him solemnly. "Looks like it's 10 this time. What a record." He chuckled to himself. Michael didn't understand why this happened. Usually it occurred when he was reading a book or watching comedy sketches on his smartphone. Every sound around him became a muddled mess, and he'd miss what other people would say to him. He wondered when it was going to become a chore for them. It was already a chore for him, and Merrick hated it since day one, but he didn't like a lot of things. Every time, man, every time. You know I can't just switch it on and off. Right, but can you at least try to do something about it? Merrick sneered. I am trying. You're not trying hard enough. I swear, you do the same shit every time and expect people to be patient with you, even though you're not changing a bit. It can't be that difficult. Michael stared blankly at him. It is. Merrick then put his fingers up and began counting each one. You keep forgetting to put your clothes in the dryer or take them out and put them away. You keep forgetting to even clean your glasses. You don't talk to anyone at school. You always fuck something up when you drive. And don't even get me started on the time when you left your underwear on when we went to the pool. You're a mess, Mike. I know, I'm sorry, I know. He hung his head down. Merrick kept going. Do you care, though? I don't think you do. I think you're just lazy. Maybe that's all this is. He left it there. No one spoke until their father came into the room. Michael's dad looked tired, probably from work. He sat down and sighed heavily, his eyes fluttering as he tried to stay awake. Merrick turned to the TV, and Michael did the same. They both pretended that the other person didn't exist, which was better than the alternative. Michael tried to focus on the show this time. It eventually got to a point where commercials came on. There were the random drug ads, the fast food places, the unimportant clothing products, and the occasional commercial, where Michael would perk up and actually listen to what was being advertised. He especially loved the theme park promotions. Those were exciting and fun. His attention began to wade, until his dad turned his head to him and pointed at the screen in front of him. You see that, Mike? That's the good stuff right there. He winked. Michael was about to point out that his dad was still married, but decided against it. He turned toward the screen. It was a lingerie commercial. Because of course it was. The women were showing off their bras and panties for all the onlookers to see. Merrick started staring intently in a certain direction, but he did that with both genders, so Michael just ignored him. But he didn't get it. What was the point of this commercial? To entice people? He guessed it worked, but somehow not for him. He saw it everywhere. Everyone would bring it up, no matter when or where. Some people were obsessed with it, and made Michael extremely uncomfortable. The only thing he could reasonably compare it to was a donut, and hunger was the attraction. Michael did not want the donut, nor was he hungry. He wondered if he would ever be hungry in this situation. After going with this analogy, he started thinking about how other people could theoretically fit in it. Some people could be hungry and not eat the donut, instead settling with something else to eat. Perhaps they wouldn't be hungry, but they will gladly eat the donut anyway. Perhaps neither, like him. Or perhaps he needed a better analogy, but his wondering persisted and went in new directions. If he was the only person who felt this way, people would most likely see him in a different light. He wondered how his parents would feel. They accepted Merrick, but non-attraction was a separate thing entirely. He wondered how the world would think of him. He did not fit that specific mold that they required, so the systems in place would most likely batter him or ignore his existence. It was a certainty. But this wasn't much of an issue for him. He dealt with the side glances before. He could handle the suspicion and the name-calling. But could he handle it twice as much? Most likely not. So he put on his mask and left it at that. After all, he was a good pretender. The cool autumn breeze flowed through Michael as he did his morning jog around the perimeter of the site. He needed the reprieve from his daily blunders, and fall had the best weather for this purpose. Michael could never stand the heat, and he only liked winter because he could stay indoors to drink a nice cup of hot chocolate. But spring and fall were the in-between seasons, and fall especially had that fresh and crisp weather that made it perfect for his workouts. As he rounded his last lap, he saw people clocking into the site for the day. One man waved to him, and he waved in return, before heading to the side entrance of the site and stopping the timer on his phone. He thought about the guy waving at him. Did he know him? Well, Maybe he did. Everybody did since Michael was the head psychologist. But did he know him? Michael honestly forgot that he wasn't an enigma anymore. He had a presence, and he did his job well. But outside of work, he wouldn't go out of his way for conversation. He knew the names of many people, but people were more than just names. Each person had their own storybook, with the chapters of their lives filled with many tales, some of which were amusing anecdotes, while others were more disheartening. But they all equally fascinated him. Stories were his lifeblood, his way to see the world, his way to connect. And they were why he had this job in the first place, to see how people ticked, and to help write their stories so that they wouldn't feel alone. As he wandered through the plaster hallways, he saw more people making their way to their specific sections, people he could talk to. But even if he tried, everything would remain the same. His social skills were inadequate, and conversations would pass by him with the wind. And he tried. He always tried. But when the only advice he ever got in his life regarding this was just talk more, after a certain point he didn't even bother. He had all the opportunities to meet new people, to make new friends, and he never did. College and high school were a blur to him. And after that, he got picked up by the foundation, but still, nothing would change. He had to change. He couldn't be a static point in an ever-evolving world. But what could he even do? He sat on that thought as he made his way to his office to prepare for his next session. He couldn't achieve what he wanted by default. There was always something blocking him from living a life that's not filled with constant oversights. And he knew what it was. Of course he knew what it was. He had an entire PsyD to figure it out. But even with all that knowledge, it still kept coming, to ruin his life at every waking moment. He checked the time. It was getting close. Good thing he was prepared. Wait. A familiar feeling crept from the back of his mind. Something was off. He missed something. But what? He looked around the room and on his person. Phone, check. Documentation, check. Glasses, check. Pen. Where was the pen? Oh, he missed his pen and clipboard. "You fucking moron!" he bellowed, before immediately throwing himself into a sprint towards his dormitory. Instead of just leaving his stuff in his office, he left it in his personal quarters. Again. He ran like hell through the halls, catching a few odd glances from a few researchers. But he paid no mind to them. He had to get his stuff. Michael slammed the door open and immediately started throwing his stuff around the room, not caring if he would break anything. That was something that future him could worry about. He paced around the room, smacking his forehead over and over again. How could he forget something as simple as a clipboard and a pen? Eventually he found them. They were hiding in one of his drawers for reasons that he failed to recall, because of course he did. But he had to focus. He snatched the clipboard and pen and went right back into his sprint. Emily always joked that if the site had a 100-meter dash competition, Michael would easily get first place. He didn't think he would be the winner, but he could go quite fast. The problem with that was the immediate consequence of complete and utter exhaustion, which would definitely be a disadvantage for him. Now, he ran through the corridors and skidded through tight corners until the final stretch, where he successfully entered his office with only minutes to spare. He breathed deeply and nearly stumbled into his desk as he made his way to his chair with clipboard and pen in hand. He checked his calendar off for the day. Once Avery's session was over, he could relax. Regardless of how limited it was, Michael found his finite free time valuable, so he could ignore the clawed hands of reality for just a moment. The door to the office opened once more, and Avery stiffly stepped towards the reclined chair across from Michael. "Welcome back, Avery. I'm glad you could make it to our session today." They crossed their arms. "Yeah, I'm getting used to it, I guess." He tapped his pen against the clipboard. "Are you having any trouble adjusting to your environment?" They scoffed. "How can I adjust to a cell? But maybe. I don't really talk to the others." Perhaps I can arrange a group activity?" They shook their head. "If it's anything like those group projects at school, then fuck that." "Let's not go with that, then." "I wasn't fond of icebreakers either, but I will figure this out with you." They nodded before staring at Michael's glasses for a second. "Sorry if this sounds rude, but I think your glasses look a little dirty." "Oh, you're fine. I actually prefer a little honesty. I do sometimes miss these things. I'll clean them when we're done. Thanks." He put up his facade to not make them feel guilty. The lenses in Michael's glasses were cheap plastic, so he had to clean them in the morning every day. Otherwise, they would be smudged for the whole day. Thing was, no one except for his immediate family ever pointed it out to him. Michael concluded that it was either because they were too nice to be blunt with him, or they went on with their lives instead of having to worry about trivialities. He wished he could have that sense of indifference, but that was for him to figure out. For now, his work must proceed as usual. It proceeded as it always did. He never really had a chance to do anything otherwise. Story, a Betamax suicide note. April 4th, 2005. Backdoor Soho. Secreted away in her private workshop, the builder was assembling a living collage. It was female and bare-chested, breasts supplanted by the lawnmower engine she'd shoved through its sternum. Its hair was tangled copper wire, its arms were absences, and its torso, centaresque, smoothly extended from the far side of an 18th century mahogany table. The skin and muscle of the left side of its stomach had been pulled back like the hood of a car, exposing its steaming organs to the afternoon light. The builder frowned and squinted into the meat of it. High school anatomy really didn't prepare you for how much stuff there was in people. It was beautiful, in a way. Red and white wrapped around bursts of glistening, vivid color. Yes, it was beautiful. And really goddamn tricky to work with. The builder reached backward with a wooden arm, puppet-jointed and gore-slick. With her sleeves rolled all the way up, you could see the line where the geometry of her prostheses met with the scarred flesh of her forearms. "Pliers," she said. Her assistant, a quiet young man with a violently violet crew cut named Aubergine, passed her the pliers. She reached in and, untroubled by viscera, pushed aside a bit of intestine with one hand to fret at the delicate machinery she'd installed inside. When she twisted a bit of metal about, the collage opened solid black eyes and made a sound like birdsong crossed with a chainsaw's roar. The builder's frown deepened. A tall, dark woman wearing stylish clothes and a pale mask was watching her work. She was lounging on a nearby table saw, leaned against it casually with her hand placed dangerously close to the blade. She said, "Try turning that counterclockwise." The builder turned the pliers counterclockwise. This time, when the collage's eyes opened, they were solid white, and it made no sound at all. It still wasn't the response she was looking for, but it was a marked improvement. This sort of work, biomechanical collaging, amateur experimental surgery, an abomination against God and nature, whatever you wanted to call it, had never been the director's field of expertise. She'd always been best at providing guidance, management, direction. It was why she was there. At the start, the director had told their bright-eyed volunteer to stay alive. So long as she was nearby and didn't give it a new direction, the collage wouldn't die on the builder's table, which was good because she hardly remembered anything from high school anatomy. The builder held an organ, a kidney, maybe, to the light. "Does this look important to you?" she asked. She was still wrist-deep in its guts and about to finish, not an innuendo, thanks, when the workshop's buzzer sounded. The builder wiped the back of her hand against her forehead, carelessly smearing red blood into the black of her cropped hair, the bronze of her skin. "Can you go downstairs and get the door?" she asked. Aubergine nodded and started picking his way through the half-finished projects that littered her workspace. The director tilted her head quizzically, her mask's expression a coy, black-lipped smile. "Expecting more company?" "It's the janitor." The builder carefully picked up a suture needle with her lacquered fingertips and began stitching the art piece closed. "I had it collect some weird bones for the collage. I'm surprised it got them all so quickly." The director drummed her fingers on the saw blade's edge, restless and uninjured. The builder knew how sharp these things could be. "That thing has upsetting wrists. It's dangerous." The builder spared the director an appraising glance. "I keep forgetting how recently you joined," she said. "If I were you, I wouldn't worry about it. The janitor's designed to be harmless to us." "Designed?" echoed the director. "The rumors are true, then?" For as long as there had been an art movement associated with the letters A, W, C, and Y, there had always been a critic. And as long as there had been a critic, there had been a clique within the clique, an inner circle of anarchists handpicked by the critic of their time to lead the community to greater heights. It was a paradox that a group like theirs would have such an ingrained, unquestionable hierarchy at its core. But then, paradoxes had always been part of the point. Little was known about the first critic. that mad iconoclast who started it all. Even his name and face had been forgotten by time. Even his body of work, every piece of art he'd ever made, was lost. Every piece but one. "Depends on the rumor," the builder said cryptically. "Not that I'd know." Two men entered the room. It was Aubergine and someone that wasn't the janitor. He looked like an oversized dandelion seed, pale and gangly, with a big brown afro. The man carried a well-loved sketchbook under one arm and was holding a videotape with the other. In lieu of greeting, he wiped a smidge of indigo paint from the corner of his mouth and asked, "Where's your Betamax player?" "Nice to see you too, painter." The builder's gaze didn't stray from her work as she nodded, the suture closed. "I think I left it in the junk pile. What do you need it for?" "The Clipper sent me this tape he found. I hear it's killer stuff. Barely anyone's seen it yet." "Don't tell me it's another snuff film. Those are getting old." "It's not a snuff film." The director pushed herself up to full standing, leaning heavily on the saw blade. "Don't you already have a Betamax?" she asked. The critic, they all knew, was a little obsessed with the VHS's less successful sibling. Whenever someone joined the inner circle, he'd give them a Betamax player along with their definitive article. In a far corner of the chamber, the painter was already pawing through a pile of discarded objects. A bag of nails, a partially disassembled blowtorch, an inside-out Furby. Each was cast aside as he searched. The painter ducked his head and muttered, "Sold it to an analog witch. It's gone." The director and the builder shared a knowing look. The builder grinned. "It's full of paint, isn't it? I keep telling you, acrylics aren't a good recording medium, man." "Found it," said the painter overloud. He lifted a battered Betamax player from the pile. "So, where's your TV?" "Under the couch," Aubergine said. "I'll get it." As the painter and Aubergine went about unrolling and inflating her television, the builder wiped her hands clean of gore, fingers clacking like drumsticks. She looked at the collage. It wasn't finished yet, but it was getting close. Soon, the janitor would be arriving with a bundle of bones, strange bones, long and flexible, from animals without names. She was going to attach them to the collage's temples and fan them out like antlers, like TV antennae. The bones would take in whatever signals they touched and coalesce them together into obscure clusters in its chest, then sink them down to burn in the pit of its stomach, sound and fire beneath its skin, illuminating it from the inside. Across the room, the painter pushed the Betamax tape into place. The inflatable television burst to life. A title card in Comic Sans, Les titres semblants plus signifiant en français. The recording opens on an empty stage, lights dimmed. The susurrus of an audience, out of frame, runs beneath. Lights go up. The theater quiets. The viewer now sees a huge canvas laid across the back wall, end to end. A woman enters, stage right. She is wearing a white sleeveless dress. Her hair is long and unbraided. It is difficult to describe her further. The poor video quality abstracts her body. Her face is an indistinct haze. She bows once to the audience, dipping her head low, and begins. The woman turns and extends her arm, palm outstretched. A long, thin tendril of skin peels off her arm, twisting languidly through the air, unbloodied. The tendril melts into the canvas, leaving behind a beige coil on its surface. Her arm twists and more thin tendrils of skin peel away. She sweeps out her leg, foot pointed like a ballerina, and tendrils curve out of this part of her, too. She continues on like this, moving through a strange, slow dance, bits of skin gently pulling away in some impossible breeze to become pigment. Then she starts to bleed. She doesn't falter at first. Her blood flows, yes, but it flows up. Ribbons of blood follow ribbons of flesh in elongated helixes, introducing shades of crimson to the canvas. Her dress remains clean and unmarked, even as new wounds open like flowers across her body. The painting that forms on the canvas is difficult to make sense of, splotchy and impressionistic, but something is growing there, in the empty spaces, an image in the process of being born. The woman stumbles for the first time, and a single mote of red stains the edge of her dress. She stumbles again, and again. Her movements grow less refined, overtaken by a split-open, frantic energy. Graceful ribbons become urgent splatters and splashes. She nearly falls and throws an entire finger, popping it against the canvas like a water balloon. Blood seeps through her dress. In the thick grain of the video, her face is unreadable. Perhaps she holds an expression of serene acceptance, or perhaps hers is pained and ugly. In this way, she too becomes a canvas. The viewer paints emotion onto her. Bleeding profusely and missing chunks of herself, the woman reaches her limit. She stumbles, then topples like an overturned tree, collapsing into a pool of her heart's own blood. She is dead. Her painting is unfinished. The audience erupts into ecstatic applause. Cut to black. After several moments of nothingness, the screen says, "Sommes nous divinus magnifiques." Once it was clear that nothing was left on the tape, Aubergine switched off the television and yanked out the plug. It made a pitiful little whistling sound as it began to deflate, slumping over to one side. The builder's assistant flopped back onto the ratty couch, around which the group had congregated to watch the sanguine performance. The painter sniffed noisily and swabbed away little dribbles of turquoise paint from his tear ducts. "That was beautiful," he said, voice cracking like splintered wood. "Yeah," agreed the builder, like something from a Monica Rojas fleshcrafting exhibition. "That was such a load of horse shit," retorted the director. Both of the builder's eyebrows shot up. She'd never heard the director speak so acrimoniously. The other woman always seemed so in control of her emotions. Beneath her ever-smiling mask, the director's arms were crossed, fists clenched in opposite sleeves. "Damn," said the painter. "Who pissed in your paint mug?" "That video," snapped the director, "was a slap in our collective face. The exact kind of petty garbage I've come to expect from only Ruiz Duchamp would try to win an argument by killing herself." Aubergine leaned close to the builder and whispered, "Is this going to go on for a while?" "Our discussions tend to," the builder replied honestly. "I'll go get lunch then. You want me to pick you up anything?" "Can you grab me a bag of wood chips? I've been craving them all day." "Sure." The builder's eyes automatically tracked Aubergine's route through the debris of the workshop as he departed. He was getting better at navigating the space. Soon she wouldn't have to worry about her assistant getting himself horribly maimed. This was very good news. It was then, when she was turning back to the conversation, that she noticed it. A number of long and ancient bones had been carefully, precariously stacked like an inverted house of cards on top of the Betamax player. She hadn't noticed it before. None of them had. Someone had walked in and painstakingly arranged the bones right in front of their eyes without being perceived. The builder smothered the urge to look about herself. She knew it'd be useless. The director was saying, "Went to theater school together. We had a lot of arguments about what artists owe to their art, among other things. Didn't get along." "You still haven't explained why Duchamp's video has you so riled up," interjected the builder. The director pressed her fingertips to her mask's forehead, as if attempting to massage her temples through the pallid shell of it. "Did Duchamp do anything to the tape? Any kind of exploit to keep it from being copied?" "Something like that," nodded the painter. "Clipper told me he tried to make a digital version for his personal library, and it blue-screened his laptop." "How'd you know?" "Because this tape is targeted at us, at the critic, his well-documented Betamax fixation, and everyone directly associated with him. It's a statement, directly addressed to the anartist community. She's saying that she's more dedicated to her art than we are, more willing to give everything for it, because now she has." "So what?" said the builder. "She's saying I'm a truer artist because I hurt myself instead of other people. What does it matter? Pain is pain, no matter the source." The painter plucked a thin paintbrush from somewhere in his hair to scratch at the inside of his ear. "I think she was saying she's got more personal commitment, and artists like us don't have nearly enough." "Exactly," gritted out the director. "As if living a long life and devoting it, all of it, to art isn't meaningful. As if dying isn't easy. Anyone can do it. People kill themselves every day. She's not special." "And you are?" Everyone turned. The slumbering TV had rewoken, blaring electric blue as it righted itself, still unplugged before them. There were words on the screen, and a voice was behind them, a woman's voice, stretched across the rack of static until it became something cacophonous, inhuman. A radio scream. The tower of bones wobbled, unsettled. "Does hurting people make you special? Does it make your art real? Did you turn the TV back on?" "Girl, you know I didn't." "Because it doesn't. You're not special." "Well, turn it off. Jesus, my ears, you're not a real artist. I'm trying, and you're not cool. Be quiet. The television collapsed in on itself, silenced by the director's command and exhaling stale air. For a fraction of a moment, the room was suffocatingly silent. Time stretched. Then the bones came thundering to the ground. The man the Soho and art community knew as Aubergine slouched in an alleyway and plugged a number he knew by heart into his burner phone. "Agent Tangerine reporting," he said. "I found Duchamp." He paused. "Dead, sir." Pause. "Not sure. I saw a video of the event, not an actual body. It didn't say when it was recorded." Pause. "No, sir. Going by the reactions, I'm sure it was real. These people would know if it was a hoax." Pause. "Best case scenario? We probably have a week or so until shit hits the fan. Worst case could be hours, and this is just a hunch, but..." He looked up. Storm clouds were gathering over backdoor Soho, bearing down on the city like colossal anvils waiting to fall. "It's going to be a bad one. I can feel it,"